Welcome to episode 3. Episode 3's topic is the last stand of the 300 Spartans. Most people have seen that Gerard Butler movie, 300. It's pretty cool. It's from 13 or 14 years ago. Why do people always make movies about this? Why do people make songs about it and all kinds of stuff for thousands of years? It was a really important part of a larger war, of which is important to learn about. The last stand of the 300 Spartans is the Battle of Thermopylae. The Battle of Thermopylae is part of the Second Persian War. In order to understand this, you need to go back a little bit and understand Greece and the First Persian War. We're talking 2,500 years ago. The largest empire the world had ever seen was the Persian Empire. Meanwhile, you have tiny little Greece, which is not even a united place at this point. It is completely divided into separate city-states. A city-state has its own government, its own culture, its own economy, and the city-states within Greece will sometimes be allies, sometimes go to war with each other. Of course, the two most famous and two most historically important city-states are Athens and Sparta. Athens is so important historically because it is the birthplace of democracy. They literally invented democracy. Meanwhile, in Sparta, their way of life is the exact opposite of Athens. In Athens, people value things like art and learning. They wanted to learn to read. They wanted to learn history and math and science. And in Sparta, all they wanted to learn was military fighting and strategy and things like that. They were a military state, which means that they were entirely for the purpose of the military and preparing for war. In Sparta, when a boy was 7 years old, he would be taken from his family and brought to the agoge. So they would live in barracks and they would learn how to fight, beginning at 7 years old. Eventually, they had to kill somebody and get away with it. There was all kinds of stuff they had to do to sort of prove themselves. If they never gave up and they always won and didn't complain, then their families were really proud of them. And they would serve in the military, every single man. Of course, if a child was born with some sort of disability or other disadvantage that would make it impossible for them to be a soldier, they were left to die. They didn't even bother raising them, which is really disturbing. Women were treated a little bit better in Sparta than they were in other city-states in ancient Greece and in much of the ancient world. Women were allowed to learn how to fight or play sports and, those kinds of things that they couldn't do in other parts of the ancient world. Sometime before the Battle of Thermopylae was the First Persian War. This is when Darius the Great of the Persian Empire invades Greece, and the big battle of this war is the Battle of Marathon. This is why a marathon is 26.2 miles or whatever it is, because that's the distance between Marathon, where the battle happened, and the city of Athens. So when the Greeks defeated the Persians, a runner went back to Athens to say, "Yay, we won," Nike, which means victory in ancient Greek, and then he fell down dead. But that distance, that's why the marathon is that distance. In the First Persian War, you see all these Greek city-states that are completely separate from each other and often at war with each other. They put those things aside to unite together because they know that if they don't, they will all die and all of Greece will be ruined. So they have really no choice but to unite. And this happens again for the Second Persian War. So Darius the Great, who's the leader of the Persians during the First Persian War, he fails and he dies, and his son is Xerxes. Xerxes takes up his father's life goal. It becomes his life goal, which is to destroy Athens, burn Athens to the ground. And he's so obsessed with it. He has people whose job it is in his court to come to him every day and say before dinner, remember the Athenians, remember that you want to kill these people and destroy their city completely. So he's obsessed with it. The Second Persian War happens. Persian forces, back then they thought it was 1 million people. Realistically, it's probably about 100,000 or 150,000, which was the largest land force the world had ever seen at that point. And they're coming in the north, coming into Greece, which is very, very mountainous. So most of people who live in Greece, most of the city-states are in the southern half of Greece, but to get there you've got to go through the mountains. To get through Greece, there's really only one well-known pass, one passageway, so to speak, which has mountains on one side and water on the other. And so you've got to go through this if you want to get to southern Greece where the people are, if you want to get to Athens. And the name of this pass is Thermopylae. The Greeks know this, the Persians know this. So about 7,000 Greek forces from various city-states unite and go to this pass. And they are led by King Leonidas of Sparta. King Leonidas, remember, they're all about the military. He is worried about what's happening, and he has spoken to the oracle at Delphi. They believed very much in these oracles back then. And the oracle, this mystic person, told him, supposedly, that either Sparta would have to lose a king and be sad, or all of Sparta would perish. So he's going into this like, that might be me. So he goes into battle, and he's the kind of guy who fights with his army. And so there's 7,000 of them at the pass. Meanwhile, there's also a naval battle happening at Artemisium that's simultaneously occurring. When these Persians come, they could really just not be any more different than the Greek soldiers they're facing head on. But Xerxes is like, there's so few of them, we just got to kill these dudes and get by them, and then we go straight to Athens and burn that thing to the ground. What they don't realize is that these Greeks, especially these Spartans, this is like what they have been preparing for their entire lives. And to them, there is great honor in dying in battle. And they will do anything to protect Sparta. They will do anything to protect Greece. The Spartan soldiers, they fight almost naked. They don't wear a lot of clothes. They put like oil all over their bodies, and they brush their long hair. And they go into battle, they're like screaming bloody murder. And on the other side, the Persian soldiers, their weapons weren't as good, they weren't as well trained, but there's way more of them. So at the very beginning, when they finally meet head on at the Battle of Thermopylae, the Greeks are the better soldiers. Eventually, after losing like thousands of dudes, the Persians are like, we gotta send in the top dogs, the elite soldiers, and they are the immortals. The Persian immortals would fight completely silently. Okay, they march completely silently, which is the exact opposite of the Spartans. And they're covered so that you cannot see their faces. So they all look exactly the same, and they all fight extremely well. So when you killed one in battle, immediately another one would take its place, so it looked like, did I even kill that guy? Or is it the same guy? And that's kind of why they're called the immortals. Obviously, they were not actually immortal. They were just dudes who were good at fighting and all look the same. They fight a little bit better than the other Persian soldiers, but the Greeks, especially the Spartans, are still the better soldiers. Really, the point of staying and fighting here is they need to hold off the Persians and give the rest of Greece time to prepare, including evacuating Athens, because everyone knows that Xerxes wants to burn Athens to the ground. They're fighting at this pass, but what's interesting is it doesn't matter if there's 100,000 dudes here and only 7,000 here, because where they're meeting at this pass, which is maybe like 20 dudes across, it's still 20 dudes versus 20 dudes. So it's still pretty equal. And when the Greeks are the better soldiers, then 7,000 dudes are going to win, right? Or at least temporarily. So that's what's happening. Unfortunately, a Greek trader tells the Persians about another very small pass that's used by like farmers, shepherds, and it's like the only other pass is very small, and the Persians are starting to come around, and they're going to be coming around the back so that the Greeks are stuck like a sandwich with Persians on both sides. Leonidas and the Greeks know this, so he orders a tactical retreat in which some of them retreat, group by group they retreat, not all at the same time, and go back to defend Athens and the rest of Greece and prepare. But some of them opt to stay behind. So Leonidas says, I'm going to stay here with 300 Spartans. And they know that they are going to die. And they choose to stay anyway. And they see glory in that. That's part of their culture. They decide to stay behind because it's the only way they can save Sparta. So while most of the Greeks are pulled back in a retreat to go prepare the rest of Greece and Athens, 300 Spartans stay, but it's actually not just 300 Spartans. For some reason, history and movies and stuff tend to only focus on the Spartans because of who they were culturally and how interesting they are. But there were like 700 dudes from Thespia who stayed, and some others as well. So there's actually more like 1,000 or 2,000 Greeks who stay. But either way, that's like a joke compared to like 100,000 Persians who were coming. But they stay knowing 100% they're all going to die, but they do it anyway to save Greece. After the retreat, finally, the Persians come from behind, and now the Greeks are sandwiched, and eventually they're dying off. No matter how good they are at fighting and how many Persians they've killed, there are only a limited number of them, and eventually every single one of them dies, including Leonidas, fulfilling that prophecy that either the king will die or all of Sparta will die. In this case, the king died. The great Greek historian Herodotus estimated that about 20,000 Persians were killed at the Battle of Thermopylae. To be clear, the Greeks knew that they had absolutely no chance whatsoever of winning the Battle of Thermopylae. And they didn't. They lost the Battle of Thermopylae. It was undoubtedly a defeat. But the goal was achieved, and that goal was to delay the Persians, hold them off for a few days. And they held them off for 7 days, 3 of which were battle. So they did hold them off. So even though the Persians eventually won and moved forward, in the long run, it really damaged them that they took that long to get through the pass. Finally, Xerxes is like, geesh, this took a long time, but finally we did this. So let's advance now. Let's go to Athens. Let's burn it to the ground. But when they get to Athens, it's been almost entirely evacuated. So when they actually do burn Athens, it doesn't mean what Darius the Great had wanted it to mean, because there's no major loss of life there. And this is essential because the Athenians are the people who invented democracy. So by saving the people of Athens, they have saved democracy. After King Leonidas, the other important Greek figure at this time was Themistocles, an Athenian politician. He is important because he had a feeling that the Persians were going to come back after the First Persian War, but the rest of Athens was like, no, it's fine. And he was like, no, really, we need to spend a lot of money to make our navy real big. And so he was able to convince them through sketchy means. He lied to them and stuff. He convinced them to put all this money into building a navy, and thank God that he did that. There's a major naval battle, the Battle of Salamis, and eventually the Greeks win, and the Persians are just really surprised that the Greeks won, but hey, it happened. And so Xerxes goes back to the Middle East with his tail between his legs, and most of his men die of starvation and disease and other problems like that. Greece, though they have survived, and Athens owes so much to Sparta, they go back to hating each other and going to war with each other again all the time, and that's why it's a perfect time soon after this for Alexander the Great to come in and take over, because Greece is not a united place, so it's a little bit easier for him to do that.